Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you to the Subcommittee on Energy and Environment. We have had a very interesting, momentous day so far. Many of the Democratic members of our committee were down at the White House for the signing of the health care bill, which is why this hearing was postponed from the morning until the afternoon, and we apologize for the inconvenience that it presented to all of our witnesses and to everyone else that has a great interest in this subject. So welcome to this important hearing on oversight of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, or the FERC, as it is affectionately known around here. This is the first time in over a decade that all of the FERC commissioners have testified before a House committee, all of them together, once in one place. We're glad to have you here and look forward to making this a more regular occurrence. You know, FERC kind of reminds me of Northern Iowa's basketball team. It's probably one of the least well-known teams in the federal government, but it's right in the thick of things and can be surprisingly powerful when it needs to be. Among FERC's many roles, there may be none more timely and important to discuss today than its frontline position in the battle to protect America's grid. Threats to the grid from terrorists and hostile countries represent one of the single most critical national security concerns facing our country. Every one of our nation's critical systems, water, healthcare, telecommunications, transportation, law enforcement, financial services, depends on the grid. The commercially operated grid provides 99% of the electricity used to power our critical defense facilities. This past weekend, a New York Times article reported on the work of Chinese researchers studying what type of cyber attacks could bring down the U.S. grid. That's just the latest in a wave of alarming news on this front. Over 2 years ago, the Department of Homeland Security revealed the so-called Aurora vulnerability, through which hackers could use communications networks to physically destroy power plants. The intelligence community has made clear that the cyber systems controlling the grid are continuously probed by outside parties looking for weaknesses. FERC must be given the authority necessary to combat these growing threats. After a subcommittee hearing, a classified briefing for members, and months of discussions between my staff, the staff of the Ranking Member Upton, Ranking Member Barton, and Chairman Waxman, we recently released bipartisan legislation that will give FERC the tools it needs to protect America's grid. I am proud and pleased to report that this committee will mark up that legislation tomorrow, a crucial first step in safeguarding the grid. In addition to FERC's emerging role in defending the grid, the Commission must also be a partner in addressing the massive energy challenges facing America. FERC is developing the rules to our energy road that will help America reach its clean energy and energy independence goals. The energy sector, long the bastion of antiquated technology and entrenched business models, is finally entering the innovation age. Wind, solar, and other renewable technologies are providing an ever greater share of our electricity at competitive prices and with zero carbon emissions. Last year alone, using market incentives, customers reached peak electricity demand by the equivalent of the output of 50 power plants. As smart grid technologies continue to penetrate the market, consumers will be able to turn their heat up on the way home from work, schedule their dishwasher to run when electricity is the cheapest, and fuel their vehicles using clean, low-cost, American-made electricity instead of expensive OPEC oil. At the same time, a technology revolution in production of natural gas from deep shale formations has increased America's natural gas reserves by over 30%, giving us nearly a century-long supply at current production rates. Each of these clean energy innovations brings with it significant challenges, but more importantly, tremendous opportunities. FERC will be at the forefront of the effort to grapple with these challenges and seize these opportunities. We don't know yet who the starting five will be on our clean energy all-star team. But if the team is going to be successful, it's going to need strong coaching and refereeing from the FERC. I thank the commissioners for their work on these important issues to date, and I look forward to hearing their views on how to best achieve our clean energy and energy security goals. That completes the opening statement of the chair, and I'll turn to our ranking member, the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Whitfield, for his opening statement.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. We look forward to this oversight hearing on the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. I also would like to extend a warm welcome to all of the commissioners. It is seldom that we have them all here, and we do look forward to working with you today on the many issues facing all of us. I look forward to hearing also from the panelists to how they intend to ensure that all sources of generation, including coal, nuclear, renewables, natural gas, have access to electricity transmission and markets. FERC obviously has broad authority over the electricity infrastructure as well as natural gas pipelines, and must make certain that FERC is helping provide safe and reliable energy while ensuring rates are competitive and fair. The Energy Policy Act of 2005 gave FERC new authority against energy market manipulation, including civil and criminal penalty authority. I would like to hear how FERC has been using that authority and what its future plans on this subject are. I'm also concerned that the financial services legislation which Congress is currently considering could limit FERC authority by failing to protect FERC's jurisdiction from encroachment by the CFTC. Obviously, there are many issues before us today dealing with making sure that making sure that our electricity grid and natural gas pipelines are safe and reliable. Our subcommittee plans to consider electric cybersecurity legislation tomorrow, and I hope that the witnesses will expound on why they believe additional authority to protect our grid from cyber terrorists and cyber warfare is necessary. We look forward to your testimony. Thank you again for being here, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Great. We thank the gentleman very much. We are awaiting as well the arrival of Fred Upton from Michigan, along with Mr. Barton and Mr. Waxman. There are 3 roll calls on the House floor, and what we could do right now is we could recognize members to try to squeeze in their opening statements, and then with a little bit of luck we could then recess. Yeah, excuse me, the gentlelady from...
I can make it even easier. I welcome our witnesses and I waive my opening statement.
That is a gesture that is well received by the chair, and we welcome all of the witnesses, and we turn now and recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Pitts.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. Thank you for holding this hearing on FERC oversight. There are many issues I hope we explore today, including the implementation of the Energy Policy Act of 2005, market oversight, electric cybersecurity, transmission policy, and cost allocation. The list is long. As I understand it, FERC has asked Congress to work on legislation regarding cybersecurity, which I think is of critical importance. In recent years, it's become apparent that our electric grid is vulnerable to cyber attack by terrorists or other nations, and as we move towards marking up a bill to protect our bulk power system, I'm interested in hearing the panel's thoughts on how best to protect our grid from malicious intent. In addition to cybersecurity, I think we must also focus on transmission policy here in the United States. The official report of the 2003 Northeastern blackout concluded that, quote, as evidenced by the absence of major transmission projects undertaken in North America over the past 10 to 15 years, utilities have found ways to increase the utilization of their existing facilities to meet increasing demands without adding significant high voltage equipment, end quote. Clearly, there's a significant need for an increase in transmission capacity, and this need is amplified as we consider adding more and more renewable energy to the grid. However, my district includes some of the most pristine historic landscape in the Middle Atlantic. My district also has some of the most productive farmland in the U.S. And while I'm supportive of adding more transmission capacity, I believe we do need to keep in mind the legitimate desires of localities to preserve green spaces and historic sites. And the same can be said of the siting of natural gas pipelines. Finally, I'm interested in hearing the panel's thoughts on the regulation of over-the-counter derivatives. As you know, in my state of Pennsylvania, electric and natural gas companies use derivatives to hedge or lock prices of commodities they plan to use or sell in the future. And the Pennsylvania PUC has stated that mandatory centralized clearing or exchange trading for all OTC transactions would needlessly increase expenses associated with hedging and risk management activities. So important issues. Look forward to hearing our witnesses and yield back.
We thank the gentleman very much. Time is running down here, and we have 3 minutes left to go before we have to be on the floor. We'll recognize the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Burgess, for an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am also pleased we're having the hearing today to discuss with the full Commission the issues before the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. We're all well aware that expansion of infrastructure for electricity is critical, as is the infrastructure for natural gas. In communities across this country, the electric grid is at or near capacity, with the price of oil fluctuating daily and likely increasing again, as it always does with the summer months. The demand for natural gas, a cheap and abundantly available energy source, may likewise increase. The need for a strong infrastructure for natural gas is evident in my own backyard. My district is home to the Barnett Shale, which is one of several sources of natural gas throughout the country, which, thanks to new technologies and techniques in gas retrieval, is providing both energy and economic opportunities in North Texas. Beyond natural gas, Texas has been a leader in renewable energy as a leading state in wind power. Advances to the electric grid will enable increased uses of renewable energy, as electricity from renewable sources is able to travel further in more advanced power lines. But we are all well aware that renewable energy alone will not meet this country's needs, which is why new sources of energy from nuclear power are critical if we're serious about a cleaner energy portfolio. I hope today's discussion will be productive in moving us toward a stronger infrastructure that will provide consistent power to every sector of our economy, and I yield back.
Great. The gentleman yields back. We thank the gentleman. All time for opening statements by members has been completed, unless Mr. Waxman or Mr. Barton show up. And as a result, when we come back, we'll be recognizing you, Mr. Chairman, as the first order of business, but you can expect that to occur in about 20 minutes. Okay, so with that, the subcommittee stands in recess. So the Subcommittee on Energy and Environment is called back into order, and we welcome you all again. And now we're ready for testimony from our very distinguished panel. Our first witness today is the chairman of the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, John Wellinghoff. At FERC, Mr. Wellinghoff works to open wholesale electric markets to renewable resources and promote greater efficiency in the nation's energy infrastructure. We look forward to hearing your testimony, Mr. Wellinghoff. You may proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Could you move that microphone in a little bit closer, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Whitfield, members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today to discuss the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's work on critical energy issues now facing our nation. I'll summarize my testimony, but I request that my full written remarks please be included in the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
First, I want to convey to this subcommittee that it's my privilege and honor to serve as the head of, in my opinion, one of the most extraordinary agencies in the federal government. We have over 1,400 dedicated, highly skilled, and extremely competent employees who come to work with the intent of making energy delivery system in this country work better for the benefit of consumers. Those employees are focused on FERC's mission. As stated in the FERC strategic plan that I provided to Congress last fall, the Commission's mission is to assist consumers in obtaining reliable, efficient, and sustainable energy services at a reasonable cost through appropriate regulatory and market means. Our employees work to fulfill this mission every day, and I'm so proud to work with them. Fulfilling our mission involves two primary goals. First, promoting the development of safe, reliable, and efficient energy infrastructure that serves the public interest, and second, overseeing rates, terms, and conditions for wholesale sales and transmission of electric energy and natural gas in interstate commerce. I'd like to highlight some of the steps the Commission is taking in pursuit of each of those goals. To promote the development of safe, reliable, and efficient energy infrastructure, the Commission is, among other actions, siting natural gas pipelines to bring new low-cost gas supplies to markets to serve consumers' needs, siting hydropower projects to increase energy supply in markets, reviewing transmission planning, cost allocation, and interconnection processes for the electric grid so that new resources of supply can be efficiently and economically delivered to markets to serve consumers, using incentive-based rate treatments in appropriate circumstances to encourage investment in transmission infrastructure, including advanced transmission technologies and facilities designed to connect location-constrained renewable energy resources to load centers, protecting the reliability of the grid, and facilitating the development of smart grid technology and standards that will increase efficiency, reliability, and flexibility of the electric system. In addition to overseeing rates, terms, and conditions for the Commission jurisdictional services, the Commission is, among other actions, implementing congressional policy that wholesale competition can provide benefits to consumers in all regions while respecting regional differences, instituting improvements to organized wholesale electric markets, including enabling a wider range of resources to compete, thus delivering benefits to consumers, developing a national action plan on demand response that builds on the national assessment of demand response potential and will encourage the use of additional resources for the benefit of consumers, and pursuing a balanced approach to oversight and enforcement, including attention to deterring market manipulation and promoting compliance with mandatory reliability standards for the bulk power system. Each of my fellow commissioners will briefly discuss some of these important issues. First, I want to indicate for the committee my apology. Commissioner Moeller left. He had to leave. Apparently, there's a personal issue he has to deal with. His house is on fire, is what he indicated to us. So he literally has an emergency. And I will do Commissioner Moeller's section with respect to hydropower and natural gas infrastructure. Commissioner Spitzer will discuss the operation of the organized wholesale electric markets and corresponding benefits for consumers, as well as other competitive markets subject to the Commission's jurisdiction. Commissioner Norris will discuss our nation's potential for demand response and the progress being made in some organized wholesale electric markets to harness that potential. I truly enjoy working with my fellow commissioners. They, too, like our FERC staff, are dedicated to FERC's mission. The Commission's work is vital to achieving our nation's energy goals, including the need for energy security and the availability to consumers of clean, affordable energy for our nation's economic revitalization. My colleagues and I each and each and every FERC professional and administrative staff member are committed to our agency's mission and to ensuring that consumers have access to those clean, affordable, and reliable energy supplies they deserve. Thank you for the opportunity to appear before you. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. Our next witness is Commissioner Mark Spitzer. He is an experienced regulator who chaired the Arizona Corporation Commission before coming to the FERC. He has focused on expansion of natural gas infrastructure, demand-side management, and renewable energy policies. We look forward to hearing your testimony. Mr. Spitzer, whenever you're ready, please begin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And after your opening remarks, I was tempted to merely say I agree. But I think you want me to say something, and as you know, it's
That's a good start.
It's hard to muzzle a lawyer.
Yeah, I like testimony that
Thank
starts
you.
that way.
Mr. Chairman, I submitted written testimony that I will summarize.
And without objection, your testimony will be included in the record in its entirety, as will Mr. Norris's and Mr. Moeller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. FERC is endeavoring to combine the best of competitive markets with appropriate regulation, so competitive market forces interact with consumer protection through appropriate regulatory oversight. And if I could illustrate, the Chair alluded to my tenure in the Arizona Commission. In August 2005, in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, the consumers of Arizona were faced with a horrendous burden when natural gas prices spiked to $15 per MMBTU. So the gas distribution companies, as well as the power plants using natural gas to run electricity, were first to go on the market and purchase gas that was spiked due to the shut-in of gas supply in the Gulf Coast. The Arizona consumers lacked natural gas storage. There was only one pipeline system, and the consumers were greatly burdened. A price spike up to $15 has long-term negative ramifications for consumers. Well, shortly thereafter, the Energy Policy Act was signed into law, and Arizona consumers, and as well as regulators, could look to Washington, D.C. for relief. If you consider, and the members have alluded to, the phenomenon of greater production of shale gas, this is a phenomenon where competition through technology was spurred and improved by regulatory support, so that the markets did in fact work. Pipelines were constructed, storage facilities were constructed. This country now has a much greater diversity of energy supply, specifically with natural gas, than existed only a few short years ago. Similarly, FERC has endeavored to pursue fair energy markets with appropriate oversight. We have brought a small number of manipulation cases that are very important to deter those who would seek to manipulate America's energy markets. We've brought enforcement proceedings similarly to ensure that the prices are fair. The chairman alluded to the smart grid, and I think the smart grid is a wonderful opportunity to pursue demand response, energy efficiency, and go, as the chair alluded, go to a 21st century grid. We have seen the emergence of smart meters, but I think it's very important that we have smart prices to go along with those smart meters, so that the ratepayers of the United States can fully derive the benefit from the smart grid. On the area of cybersecurity, I would note the proposed legislation for markup with the observation that the Section 215 Federal Power Act process is very ill-suited to deal with emerging cyber vulnerabilities, and I think that the proposed legislation should be seen as in partnership with the existing law under Section 215 to deal with reliability of the grid. And then, I guess finally, I want to thank the chairman for his efforts, as well as my colleagues, Commissioner Norris and Commissioner Moeller. And since I arrived at FERC, I was also able to work with former Commissioner Kelly and former Chairman Kelleher in a way to provide for a reliable supply of energy at reasonable prices It was truly a bipartisan and team effort, and we will work as very hard as possible to continue the efforts at FERC on behalf of the ratepayers of the United States. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Spitzer, very much. And our final witness is John Norris. He has years of experience in energy policy and regulatory affairs as a lawyer, a top official at the Department of Agriculture, and chairman of the Iowa Utilities Board. We thank you for joining us, Mr. Norris. Whenever you're ready, please begin.
Thank you, Chairman Markey. Good afternoon, and thank you members of the committee for inviting me here today. I've only been on the commission for a couple of months now, so I appreciate this chance to get my feet wet with the subcommittee here. I also haven't consulted my colleagues yet, but I like the metaphor of Northern Iowa as for FERC's role going forward. And being in Iowa, and I can assure you, for both us and Northern Iowa, our best days are yet to come.
And as you know very well, because we've seen each other in Iowa many times, and as a former future cabinet officer in the Kennedy, Dukakis, Tsongas, Gore, and Kerry administrations, I have spent a lot of time in Dubuque in my life. I could very comfortably run for city councilman in Dubuque. That's where they always send the Irish guy from Boston to Dubuque. That's where the Catholics are in Iowa. And so when Boston College actually played Northern Iowa this year and got crushed, it was a very good bet for me in my pool. I mean, no money exchanging hands, of course, but I did select Northern Iowa to go a lot further than I would have if, again, it was just another experience of Boston College going to Iowa and learning some things about not just politics but basketball. So none of that is going to come off your time. If we could go back to 5 minutes for the commissioner, please, again, begin. Welcome.
Thank you. We do take great pride in our Panther basketball. Well, let me just give an overview of my written comments, which were largely pertained to demand-side resources and demand response. If there's one most important takeaway from those comments, it is that our best energy outlook for the future includes an efficient mix of both demand-side resources and supply-side resources. By providing a level playing field and the opportunity for demand-side resources to participate on a comparable basis to traditional supply-side resources, we can make a positive difference for our markets, our consumers, by allowing innovation, ingenuity, and competition and customer choice to foster competition. Let me briefly review what has evolved so far. The Commission has allowed demand response resources to be used to comply with certain reliability standards and has required that such resources be considered as a solution in utilities transmission planning processes. In the organized markets, the Commission has gone further, requiring ISOs and RTOs to accept bids from demand response resources in their ancillary services markets and enabled aggregators to bid demand response on behalf of retail customers. And we're beginning to see results. The most recent Commission survey results for demand response showed a total potential peak load reduction across the nation of 35 gigawatts, which is up 26% from the 2006 Commission survey results, and represents approximately 5% of the total forecasted U.S. peak demand for the summer of 2008. But there still remains a tremendous untapped reservoir. Last summer's national assessment of demand response potential projected through 2019 that the potential for peak electricity demand reductions across the country is up to 188 gigawatts, or up to 20% of our national peak demand. So where will the changes occur? Well, existing reliability and market rules and structures were developed around the needs and operating characteristics of traditional generation resources. There's not always consensus as to how and whether specific rules and structures should be modified to create a level playing field for demand response resources, but my expectation is that as we gain additional experience, the Commission will continue to modify and shape demand response policies. Just last week, the Commission issued a notice of proposed rulemaking to address compensation of demand response resources. The NOPR proposes and seeks comment on requiring RTOs and ISOs in which demand response resources participate as a resource to pay demand response providers the market price for energy for reducing consumption below their expected levels. In June of this year, the Commission will issue the National Action Plan for Demand Response, and which will identify communication strategies, technical assistance to states, and tools necessary to achieve the potential identified in that assessment. FERC also remains engaged with the states in the Demand Response Collaborative. We're mindful that states have a large role in shaping the policies that affect demand response participation in electricity markets, and we continue to work closely with our state colleagues on the FERC NARUC Demand Response Collaborative to ensure that our efforts are coordinated and achieve the greatest impact. There are remaining barriers, such as the measurement and verification of demand response is yet to be finalized or agreed upon. The rules and software that the system operators use in organized markets to schedule and dispatch resources were developed around the needs and operating characteristics of traditional generation resources and may pose a barrier to demand response and other resources. And the market rules and business practices are yet unclear as to how they are to apply to demand response. The Commission is analyzing these and other issues, and if appropriate, may conduct one or more rulemakings to help further eliminate barriers to demand response. Thanks again for the opportunity to be here. I look forward to meeting the challenges of diversifying our electricity market in the future, and I think the Commission is well positioned to help lead the country in that effort.
Thank you, Commissioner Norris, very much. Can I just briefly, Mr. Chairman, in terms of Commissioner Mola's testimony, should I make a unanimous consent request that that be included in the record in its entirety?
Please.
Okay.
We'd appreciate that.
Without objection, so ordered. So the chair will now recognize himself for a round of questions. As you know, tomorrow this subcommittee will mark up legislation giving FERC new authorities to protect the U.S. electric grid against attack. How serious, in your view, is the threat to the grid from cyber and other threats, and how serious are the consequences if we don't protect the grid from those threats?
Mr. Chairman, in my opinion, the threat is extremely serious. I know that members of this committee have had classified briefings with respect to the issues that we're facing. I believe that it's critical that we address this threat as quickly as possible. It's something that FERC has been concerned about for a number of years, and I know been working with Congress to try to get a piece of legislation together that would do the job of actually addressing the threats. And I believe the legislation that you have, I haven't seen the latest draft, I've seen some earlier drafts. I believe that it really does fully look at not only threats but vulnerabilities as well, which I think is important. I understand that there may be some issues that DOD still has that would like to discuss with you, but beyond, but other than that, from what I've seen so far, I think that the legislation will provide FERC the tools that we need to ensure that cybersecurity is not an issue for this country with respect to the grid.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Now, there are some industry stakeholders who take the view that although there may be a need for new federal authority to react to a grid security emergency, that the current system of industry standard setting through the NERC is adequate to defend the grid against attack by terrorists of hostile nation states. What, in your view, are the limitations in the current system, and why should we give the FERC the authority to establish interim requirements if you determine that NERC standards haven't addressed a critical weakness to attack?
Mr. Chairman, currently under the NERC FERC reliability process, we have, I believe it's 8 cybersecurity SIP standards that we have approved, but those standards came to us through a process where FERC takes to its stakeholder group these proposals. The proposals are discussed over a period of time, they're voted upon, and then they're ultimately submitted to us. That process, I believe, is not expeditious enough to deal with threats, certainly, where we have an immediate threat that's identified by the President, or really to deal with vulnerabilities in a really effective manner. Number one, we still don't have a process where we can provide information to the utilities on a confidential basis, which is a real gap, I believe, because we certainly don't want the fixes to get out to the opposition with respect to these cybersecurity threats. And we also don't have the ability to immediately send out a fix to the proper entities who need to be identified when we determine that there is a threat that exists. So I believe that the current process has allowed us to go so far, but as far as we've gone, it doesn't take us all the way that we need to go to close off the threat.
Let me ask one final question on this round, and this is for any of the commissioners. There have been concerns that a recent FERC decision could negatively impact deployment of renewable energy. As I understand it, the decision involving the Kansas utility Westar could disadvantage renewable energy projects because they would be forced to pay for the variability of their power generation. Are there options that we could pursue to include additional factors in calculating the cost of this variability? As I understand it, wind and solar variability goes down considerably if the grid is able to dispatch generation more quickly and schedule generators more frequently. Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chairman, the Westar decision is currently pending rehearing, so I can't discuss the decision specifically, but I can talk in general terms about your question. Are there other ways we can look at how to allocate these costs relative to, I believe it's regulation service for the grid that under that particular decision is being, wind is being asked to pay some portion of. I think we really do need to examine how those costs are allocated and look at very carefully how loads are involved in imposing those costs on the grid versus how resources like wind are. So I'm very open with respect to the rehearing as to what we might be able to look at there, but again, I can't talk specifically about the particular case, given it is pending for rehearing.
Okay, Commissioner Spitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, without discussing the specific Westar case, as is the case in many regulatory environments, we need to balance competing interests, and the overarching goal is just and reasonable rates. If you look at the Commission's generator interconnection rules and the changes thereto to accommodate wind that took place in 2005, the Commission has shown a great willingness to incorporate and integrate wind. If you look at our notice of inquiry regarding variable resources, we've striven greatly to increase not just wind but solar and other resources into the grid in a way that preserves reliability and minimizes cost to ratepayers. So in many cases, these costs are about balancing efforts to integrate variable resources into the grid, and at the same time, justly assign the costs of integrating those resources in a fair manner. And that is, as you know, often complex, but I don't think you can extrapolate one particular case to either a hostility to wind or hostility to the ratepayers who are bearing the costs of integrating wind.
Thank you, Commissioner Spitzer. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Whitfield.
Thank you very much, and thank you all so much for your testimony. Either one of you can answer this question. When the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals in the Piedmont case ruled that that FERC did not have the authority for new transmission facilities location, that you do not have that authority which was given to you under the Energy Policy Act. I know a number of organizations did appeal the decision, American Wind Energy Association, Edison Electric Institute, and so forth, appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court. Evidently, the Obama administration filed a brief on FERC's behalf telling the Supreme Court that it should not take the case and review the Fourth Circuit decision. When we hear almost every day a need to expand the grid, to modernize the grid, I was curious, how would FERC or the administration make a decision and not to appeal that decision?
That was an interesting discussion in the solicitor's office. And as I understand it, first of all, it's the solicitor in the administration who makes the decision and not FERC.
Okay, so FERC was really not consulted on.
We were consulted, and I want to tell you the nature of that consultation. We were consulted. In fact, the solicitor, I understand it, agreed with us substantively that we were correct in our initial decision that the Fourth Circuit was incorrect, and I still believe we are correct. Right. However, it was my understanding that the solicitor decided not to take it up to the Supreme Court or not to ask for cert to the Supreme Court on procedural grounds, in that there was no conflicts in the circuits. It was only the Fourth Circuit that made the decision, so therefore we only had one circuit decision, so that they didn't feel that it was a significant enough case to take up. That was not our call. It was the solicitor's call.
Mr. Spitzer.
Thank you, Congressman. So there's no mistake. My opinion is that the Fourth Circuit decision was wrong. I like the dissenting opinion.
Okay.
Sometimes lawyers lose cases, and it was
Right.
we lost 2-1. One of the issues was whether the case was in fact ripe, and this gets into the unique nature of the case before the Fourth Circuit.
Right.
It was on a power line for which the application had not yet been filed at FERC, and so one of the views of the Supreme Court doesn't like taking cases that are not ripe for adjudication, and given the fact that there was no actual power line case filed at FERC, there was a real question as procedurally whether it was correct to seek certiorari to the Supreme Court. Secondly, as the chairman noted, oftentimes you look for conflicts between circuit courts of appeal to have a case go up to the Supreme Court.
Right.
So I think it's one of those unique factual circumstances, but doesn't gainsay that the final rule that FERC voted on that was basically reversed by the Fourth Circuit was adopted by the FERC, and I think we believe that the Fourth Circuit was incorrectly decided that in the Piedmont case, the only question is what is the best procedural mechanism
Right.
to pursue reversal either in the courts or with a congressional clarification.
So you all feel quite strongly that your legal team does believe that under the Energy Policy Act that FERC does have backstop citing authority?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you very much. I noticed in Mr. Wellinghoff, your testimony, I believe it was your testimony, you talked about a strategic plan to explore as appropriate in implementing market reforms that will allow renewable energy resources to compete fairly in commission jurisdictional markets. When do you expect that study or that strategic plan to be completed?
Excuse me. The strategic plan is completed. We have started to implement different aspects of that strategic plan, including looking at variable renewable resources. We just issued an NOI, Notice of Investigation, in January on that issue, asking for comments as to the barriers of integrating them into the system. The problem we have with these variable resources, both wind and solar, is that you're not completely able to forecast when you're going to have them into the system. And because of that variability, you have to look at how you're going to operate the grid in a way to ensure reliability, because we are charged with reliability on the grid. So we're very interested in determining how we can have larger and larger amounts, and there's a lot of areas in the country, one of them being the Northwest, for example, Bonneville's area, another one being the south central portion of the country, Oklahoma, Kansas area, where larger and larger amounts of wind are coming on the system because they're developing them there, and they apparently are economic, and so they're coming onto the grid. And as doing such, we need to ensure that they do it in a reliable fashion. So we want to make sure that this integration is done in a way that will protect.
Just one follow-up, if I could, Mr. Chairman. In the notice of inquiry, you're asking for public input. When do you expect that period will end for public input?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I think it's the end of March. Thank you.
All right, the gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Michigan, the Dean, the Chair Emeritus of this committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a splendid opening statement which I ask be inserted in the record.
Without objection.
Gentlemen of the Commission, is the Commission or any members of the Commission asking to have the Federal Power Act amended? on this matter? Yes or no?
Excuse me, Congressman Dingell, on the matter of cybersecurity?
Yes. Are you seeking to have any amendments made to the commission, or rather to the Federal Power Act?
Yes, we have supported legislation on cybersecurity that would require.
Would you please submit those amendments to the committee so that we can see what they are, please?
We'd be happy to do that.
Is this the commission or just individual members of the commission?
The commission has submitted.
By what vote, sir?
Excuse me?
By what vote? In other words,
We haven't.
this is the request of the commission, or is this just individual commissioners who are seeking it?
The commission doesn't typically vote with respect to proposals of legislation. We usually respond to requests from committees for information, and that comes from the commission as.
All right. Would you please submit it to us with a statement including whether this is the commission's suggestion of the committee or whether it's that of individual commissioners? Now, next question. Let's see. The commission, I want to address the question of siting, transmission siting authority. Has the commission decided who it is that should pay for new lines? In other words, is it going to be the originator of the power, the transmission company, the ultimate recipients and customers? Who will be the person who pays for these new lines, and how will the allocation of these costs and benefits be decided according to the rules of the commission?
Congressman Dingell, currently it depends on how the line's built. If it's built by a merchant, then the merchant will pay for the line. If it's built by a developer who wishes to allocate costs more broadly, then it depends upon the region, and different regions do it differently. Certain RTOs have certain
So we're not
allocation.
going to have a standard approach to this?
There currently is not a standard approach.
If I understand you correctly, you're telling me you're going to have different rules for different states or different regions?
That's correct.
How is that to be justified?
Each region decides they believe that methodology is appropriate for their region. They come to FERC, we look at it, review it, and determine whether or not it is appropriate for them. And in those instances, we then make a final determination. But we do try to look at regional differences, and there certainly are differences with respect to regions and how those costs may or should be allocated. It may be different in PJM than it is in MISO.
I'm going to
in
submit
California,
a letter
for example.
on this. We're consuming time that I don't have for this because I only have 5 minutes. Now, what evidence is there that FERC needs backstop authority as granted in the Energy Policy Act of 2005? Is there broad consensus that the states are not capable of siting new transmission lines, or that the states are acting in any way in bad faith? Is there a consensus that the consumers are suffering because these states are unwilling or unable to site new lines?
The 2005 Act provides backstop siting authority in the instance of a congestion corridor designated by DOE.
Well, I understand you got backup authority. Do you feel it's necessary to use that backup authority? And if so, where, when, and why?
I believe that in those instances where we have location-constrained resources that are needed to get to load by a long transmission line over multiple states or regions, to the extent that a particular
Have you ever used this authority, this backup authority, or have you left the matter to the states?
Currently, the backup authority is only for congestion corridors designated by DOE, which are in very limited areas of the country.
So you have not used it yet?
We have not used it yet.
Do you have any plans to use it? If so, where, when, and why?
We do not have any current plans to use it.
Do you think that it is necessary to use it for any particular reason at this time?
Not at this time.
Okay. Well, I note my time has expired, Mr. Chairman. I thank you for your courtesy.
I thank the gentleman. The gentleman from Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Along those same lines, and this is a comment, is there a possibility, because of the diversity not only of our power generation but also of our geography here in the States, is there any possibility that this is complicated enough that we might consider before any regulation that would be one size fits all, that we could do a pilot program or a couple of pilot programs that would take a particular geography and see how the integration and the reliability impact of integrating these large amounts of renewable energy into the grid, how we might do that on a pilot program before we decide that it's good for everyone. Is that unreasonable?
Congressman Griffith, I don't think it's unreasonable. In fact, I think it's going on right now. We have a great pilot going on in a place called Texas. Texas right now is integrating in 8,000 megawatts of wind, and they're going to go to 18,000 megawatts of wind. They've just developed a $5 billion transmission upgrade to do that. I just had some conversations with the Chairman Smitham and the Chairman of the Texas Public Utilities Commission on that matter. So I think we have a great incubator there of a pilot going on. We also, I think, have it going on in the different RTOs as well. In California, in the Midwest, in SPP, they all have varying amounts of renewable energy that they're integrating into their systems there, and so they're all sort of different pilots going on right now, and I think it is a good idea to have that happening.
The sharing of costs of transmission and who is responsible for it, from the maintenance to the charging of it, how is that, do you think that's going to be decided?
The sharing of cost of transmission, I hope, is initially and primarily decided by the regions and the states. And again, it's something that I hope can be worked out on that regional state level. It's largely being done that way now within the RTOs. They're working out various proposals. I know, though, for example, in MISO, the Midwest ISO, there is two different groups, one being the state commissioners primarily and another group being the transmission owners, that have different ideas of how to allocate costs, and they haven't come together yet. I think they're, as I understand it, may be coming to FERC ultimately to have us resolve for them which would be the most appropriate way to do it. But my preference would be to have the states and the regions work it out on their own.
My concern, of course, in my district is Tennessee Valley Authority. What impact do these proposed or suggested regulations do you think would have on that particular utility?
I don't believe they'd have an impact directly. I believe that the TVA determines how to allocate their costs within their own region.
Thank you.
Thank you. This time, the chair recognizes the gentlelady from Wisconsin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Wellinghoff, welcome.
Thank you.
As you, I think, noted in your testimony, and I'm sorry, I saw it in the written testimony. Sorry I missed your oral testimony today, but FERC has convened several technical conferences around the country asking for input and comment on matters relating to transmission planning, coordination, and cost allocation. And I've been hearing some observers recently speculate that these activities should leave little doubt that FERC intends to set down concrete rules of cost allocation for transmission projects. And so I'm wondering if you can confirm whether there is a cost allocation rulemaking in the works. And if so, what details can you provide us?
We are currently reviewing, as I understand it, several thousand pages of comments on those workshops that you referred to regarding cost allocation and planning. When we complete that review, we will consider a rulemaking with respect to cost allocation, and I'm certain that that rulemaking will be informed also by other proceedings like the filing that we expect from the Midwest ISO and their cost allocation proposals. So it is possible that we would move to rulemaking. I can't tell you today that it's a certainty, but we're looking at those comments and considering that in conjunction with the other filings that are coming in on cost allocation, because we are getting sort of disparate requests with respect to cost allocation from different parts of the country, and it would be good to look at them in sort of a unified whole, not saying one size fits all, because I really don't believe in that per se. I think you do have to account for regional differences on the one hand, but it may be good to set down some sort of general principles with respect to cost allocation. And I'd like to see that go forward, but again, what will ultimately come out of it will be up to a vote of the Commission.
What light could you shed on the time frame for making that decision of whether you're going to move forward with a rulemaking?
I think we should know where we're going to be in 6 months.
Okay.
It shouldn't be that long. I mean, if a rulemaking comes out, and I can't tell you when exactly it would come out, but it would be my hope at least that we would have enough analysis done on the comments and have a good enough idea from the filings from places like MISO as to what some of the alternative proposals are to look within a 6-month time frame to whether or not we want to do a rulemaking.
Okay. Last year, the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals struck down a FERC-approved tariff to distribute costs through a postage stamp rate in the PJM RTO. And I wonder if you could tell me what steps the Commission has taken in response to this case.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I just had to get a little update there. The case is pending before the Commission right now, the remand to us. But we did ask parties in the case to submit additional evidence to us because basically the Seventh Circuit asked us to do some cost-benefit analysis with respect to the way that we spread those costs in that allocation. And so we were asking for information from the critical parties in the case to ensure that we had adequate evidence to be able to go back to the Seventh Circuit and show them and demonstrate to them that our allocation methodology was appropriate.
So in light of the fact that you are taking in additional evidence, do you believe that the Commission has the authority to approve a tariff that includes some level of broad cost sharing for large transmission projects?
Yes, I believe we do. If we do it under the Seventh Circuit principles, and I think they laid it out that we don't have to be exactly precise in how we look at the cost allocation, but we do have to show how the costs and benefits were considered. And I believe we can develop sufficient evidence in the record to do that.
As you may be aware, on March 16th of this year, NARUC sent a letter to Senators Reid, McConnell, Bingaman, and Murkowski expressing some concerns that any dramatic shift by Congress in the current balance between state and federal jurisdiction over transmission line permitting and cost allocation will undermine significantly the just initiated interconnection-wide transmission planning efforts and produce gridlock. And I would ask, by the way, unanimous consent, Mr. Chairman, that that letter be inserted in the record of our proceedings today. That same letter goes on to say that they, and this is NARUC, remain unconvinced that additional federal authority over transmission is needed. I'll give you as an aside, in Wisconsin since 2001, the total value of transmission construction and upgrades that are in service or currently approved by our state's Public Service Commission for future construction is approximately $2.7 billion. The letter adds that taking action now to disrupt the existing planning process actually contradicts the congressional intent of the ARRA, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which directed the Department of Energy to give the states $27 million to coordinate transmission planning efforts across the country's 3 grids, the Eastern Interconnect, the Western Interconnection, and the Electric Reliability Council of Texas. Each of the 40 states in the Eastern Interconnection are participating in the Eastern Interconnection States Planning Council. Are you supportive, Mr. Chairman, of the platform that has been created by the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act for states and stakeholder cooperation and information sharing? And what is FERC going to do to support these ongoing efforts?
We are very supportive of that provision of that act. In fact, we were sure to get FERC inserted in that so we could be advisors to DOE with respect to that particular planning process. And so we have people who are participating in both the Eastern and Western Interconnect planning processes. We are making our FERC staff available to those two entities to ensure that they, if they need technical information and support, we'll be happy to provide that to them. And I don't see that activity as any way inconsistent with the provision in the Bingaman bill, for example, in the Senate, that provides FERC with backstop siting authority and also some clarification of our cost allocation authority. I believe that planning process can and should and will go forward, and it will go forward with FERC's full support.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I see my time has expired.
I thank the gentlelady. The gentleman from Vermont. Well,
thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have some questions following up on Dr. Griffin. There are some of us who believe that we really need a much more of an energy boost from FERC to protect consumers in the planning process of these transmission lines. And be specific, in Vermont, there's going to be very significant cost allocations, and there's a sense among our utilities that we have very little control and very little advocacy to make certain that the planning is done on a least integrated cost basis. Mr. Chairman, my understanding is that the RTOs do have an obligation to implement principle number 5, and that approach would be least cost integrated resource planning. Is that your understanding as well? Mr. Wellington?
Yes. The RTOs are a very interesting entity.
No, answer my question. I mean, I know they're interesting.
And I'm intending to.
Okay, good.
They are voluntary entities that are formed by the transmission owners in the region, and as a part of that voluntary operating and cooperation agreement, those owners decide to what extent planning is part of a integrated least cost plan. So it would be up to the stakeholders in each RTO to determine specifically what aspects of planning they'll do and whether that planning goes to the point of an integrated resource plan.
So then you don't see FERC as having some responsibility to make certain that they do the least cost integrated planning?
FERC is responsible for ensuring that rates are just and reasonable.
Yeah, but that is built upon a major cost foundation in the transmission system. I mean,
we're also responsible for ensuring that costs in the interstate transmission system are prudently incurred.
All right, let me tell you how I'm translating this, okay?
Sure.
My utilities in Vermont work pretty hard to try to keep the cost to ratepayers down, and the ISO New England does not perceive, as I understand it, they don't perceive that it's charged with doing least cost integrated resource planning, but just transmission planning. And absent very clear sense of direction from FERC, that's the way they're going to do it, to the detriment of the consumers.
Again, it's my understanding that the RTOs can make that decision internally. I don't believe that FERC has the authority to dictate to the RTOs in that regard. In fact, we've had a California case that's indicated.
Okay, let me just stop. And I'm not arguing with you. I just want to understand this because maybe we need some legislative authority. Sure. Either the ISOs have to do least integrated resource planning or they don't. Their perception, as I understand it right now, is that all they have to do is transmission planning. And is it your testimony today that FERC doesn't have a point of view on that?
No, it's my testimony today that FERC doesn't have the authority to order them to do that. My point of view, and I authored the least cost utility planning statute in the state of Nevada, so I'm very familiar with the process, is that everybody should be doing least cost utility planning.
Okay, would it be your advice to this committee that you need enabling legislation to permit you to make certain that that least cost integrated planning is done? Would that help you do your job?
I'd be happy to have that authority.
All right, would you be willing to give me some draft language that would be helpful to you to help the consumers?
I'd be happy to do that.
All right, thank you. I yield back.
Thank the gentleman. We've just received word that we've got 3 votes coming up very shortly. Any other members on either side of the aisle wish to ask any additional questions? I have one for my close. Commissioner Spitzer, your testimony discussed the revolution in natural gas production from shales. Much of this new production will come from the Marcellus Shale, located in an area that has not traditionally been a major gas-producing area. What is it going to require in terms of new pipeline infrastructure to get all of this new gas to market?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There have already been some discussions of open seasons for shale to come from Pennsylvania, western Pennsylvania, into the eastern markets to reduce the high prices in the eastern markets. They've not yet filed certificates, to my knowledge, with the FERC, and if and when those certificates are filed, they will be handled in a way that is consistent with FERC's authority under the Natural Gas Act. So it's, while we recognize that shales have been produced in various parts of the country, including the Marcellus, it's also recognized that there needs to be some pipeline capacity to get that gas into the consuming markets, and that's under longstanding federal law. Siting resides with the FERC.
All right. The ranking member has returned. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Kentucky.
Well, thank you, and thank you all again for being here today. As you know, or maybe you don't know, but I do represent a state that produces a lot of coal, and we all understand that there are environmental concerns with coal. And Mr. Wellinghoff, I know you had made a statement at one point in time that we probably wouldn't need any more nuclear power plants or coal plants. And I know that subsequent to that, you clarified that statement. But when I read a lot of documents today, we talk about renewable energy. And we know that a lot of states have renewable energy mandates, and in the cap and trade bill that came out of the House, there was a renewable energy mandate, and of course the Senate has not acted yet. And I'm not any kind of legal expert on the intricacies of FERC, but in your opinion, would it be discriminatory in any way to adopt a policy of providing incentives or giving advantage to one source of energy production over another?
From a congressional standpoint or a FERC standpoint? FERC standpoint. We, under our statute, are required to ensure that rates are just and reasonable and that there's no undue discrimination. And we uphold that policy. I believe that we have, in fact, in all our initiatives, ensured that there's not undue discrimination with respect to any resource on the grid. And that's my goal, and I think it's, I don't want to speak for my fellow commissioners, but I think it's their goal as well. So to the extent that coal or nuclear is developed and is wishing to integrate to the grid, we certainly would do whatever we could to ensure that there is a fair and open, transparent policy to do that. You just have to appreciate that over the 3.5 years that I've been at FERC, we've seen mostly wind come onto the grid, and that's been the thing that we've had to worry about. Last year, as a matter of fact, in this country, we had 9,900 megawatts of wind come onto the grid, and it's been a huge challenge. And it's been a challenge, as I indicate, from the standpoint of ensuring grid reliability, integration in a way that we can make sure the grid is stable, and that because we have the variable resource coming into the grid, ensuring that that grid's going to operate to the reliability and benefit of consumers. So it may seem that we have emphasized to some degree renewable resources, but certainly to the extent that coal and nuclear is eventually built in this country, the open transmission processes for integration will serve those resources as well.
Okay. Mr. Spitzer, would you?
Thank you. I think it might be helpful, Mr. Chairman, Congressman, in response to briefly read the last paragraph of my statement, which is, as a proponent of competitive markets, I believe the Commission must continue to focus on enhancing competition in wholesale electric and interstate natural gas markets. The Commission must continue in its role as an independent wholesale energy regulator by developing rules and policies that allow all types of resources and infrastructure to compete fairly. Just as we should not adopt rules or policies that ignore the laws of supply and demand, we should not adopt rules or policies that ignore any type of energy resource or infrastructure. Likewise, our rules and policies should not favor one type of resource or infrastructure over another. If we are to achieve the two primary goals of the strategic plan laid out by Chairman Wellinghoff, then the Commission's role should be to establish rules and policies that ensure that all types of resources, whether they are natural, gas, oil, hydro, nuclear, wind, solar, or demand resources, have a full and fair opportunity to compete for the ultimate benefit of consumers. So that would reflect mine. And I believe the Commission's views.
Yeah, I understand what you were saying, and the fact that I didn't see coal in there was, I saw demand resources, but anyway, I know what you mean. And Mr. Norris, what would be your reply?
Let me echo what the Chairman and Commissioner Spitzer said, and that is we have to, I think we treat all fuel sources fairly and equally. We'll leave it to this body to tell us how we evaluate costs, and if there are other costs associated with fuel sources, be it internal or external costs, that becomes a factor, I think, in how we move forward. But that's our job to fulfill what you tell us to do in that regard. Barring that, I think we are trying not to be the choosers or pickers of fuel, but make sure they're treated fairly.
I thank the gentleman. All right. Will there be any further questions from either side? All right. Let me, on behalf of the chairman and the full committee, thank you, gentlemen, for your testimony today. It has been very informative, and your comments are part of the record. This will conclude the hearing for this afternoon. Thank you.